Hey, it's Anthony here and welcome to today's podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you find this video inspiring, then make sure you hit the like or thumbs up button. It's a small thing that you can do that goes a long way for me. And if you like this type of content, let me know in the comments below the video and make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, then leave us a review or share the podcast with those that you know will benefit from our message. So with that said, on with today's show. Today's episode is the second half of the podcast and is a follow-on from last week's episode with Tracey Woodward. Tracey is full of wisdom and lessons from a life and business career that are well lived. When we finished recording this episode, she said to me, I think the important message for people to take away is let's not be victims of the inevitable. So in today's show, amongst other things, we discuss why in business you need to be inventive and think outside of the box, and the need to take control of your health and the importance of giving back. So Tracey, if we can just pick up where we left off in the previous episode. So for any of our listeners who didn't listen to last week's episode, I recommend that you do, because this is very much the second half of my interview with Tracey Woodward. So Tracey, let me just start by asking you about what was your sort of segue into the hairdressing industry, because you're predominantly more about beauty brands, but then, you sort of segued into working with Aveda and Urban Retreat, etc. So talk to us about that part of your journey.
Okay, so where my love of hairdressing and beauty and wellness kind of got deeper. Well, I suppose I went into hairdressing was after I left Donna Karan's. I went from travel retail to Donna Karan to Aveda, where I absolutely knew nothing about hair apart from the fact that I loved a blow dry and products. So, from that sense, this business, I was the national sales manager for Salon division, and the titles have never really bothered me. I was a brand manager at Donna Karan, yet I managed the whole business. So I joined as a sales manager of the Salon division, selling in wholesale to Salon. So I had a team of 18 regional business managers in the end. I think I had about 10 in the beginning. And that was where I cut my teeth going into salons, seeing salons on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, to understand where they were at and what they needed to build. And obviously selling them a lifestyle concept, because Aveda wasn't just about shampoos and conditioners. And in the early days, we didn't have the hair color. And then that was really, really interesting to me, to understand that a lot of these businesses weren't making the money or weren't spending the money to reinvest in their business accordingly. So, they would have the nice car and the fabulous suits, and maybe not have the ability to pay their VAT bill or pay their Aveda account. So, I think in my entire career, I'd never repossessed product from anybody. But we did it a few times at Aveda. But I had a really great team that brought in value-added services, that looked at educating, juniors and hairdressers on how to sell products. In most instances, retail was 20% of the salon owner's business, whilst they carried Aveda, because story to tell. And the Aveda story was really, really current. Fast forward to us opening the Urban Retreats in Leeds and London, and then obviously me taking on, I wasn't the managing director, but I ran the business. There was no managing director. I worked closely with George Hammer and I worked closely with Ruby Hammer, and we brought in brilliant talent. Antoinette Binders joined us. David Adams joined us from a colorist perspective. And then we raised the bar again to what hair should really be, because we wanted Aveda to be the biggest retailer of hair in the UK. So, hair products, hair experiences, hair services. And that's a big goal when you think that, the L'Oreals and the Wellers had been around forever, and we just arrived in the UK, a year in. But we grew the business through QVC, we grew the business through retail, and then we made the brand very aspirational within the salon business.
Right. So let me just ask you a question about this, because your background up until that point, working, in retail, was quite different to the hairdressing industry model of retail, and that you had professional retail and you have, consumer driven retail and there's supermarkets, etc. Now, Aveda, when they came on the scene, they were very different about that in that they went, we've got one product and we will have different routes to market. Were you sort of, was that just a natural fit for you, or were you sort of instrumental in developing that different model to take product to market?
I think as a collective, we were instrumental. You know, we had a great team of people working together to say, okay, so how do we change the verticals of a brand? Where are we going to get? We have limited resources from a PR perspective, even though we have a fantastic PR machine. You know, Millie Kendall was running the PR with the fabulous Mina Kira. So we had the vehicles to drive, but we know that you can't be on the page every day. So what we had to do was make this brand aspirational. So we brought hairdressers and the training team onto QVC to talk about the products, how to look after your hair. We drove consumers into hair salons. You know, I mean, QVC was the best advert ever for, you know, advertiser for our brand. And we drove people into salons to experience. And that's why we saw, you know, a huge surge in business and performance. But we were also dependent on the hairdressers using our products, being well trained to sell our products. Also, you know, making sure that they were being used at the backwash. So we pushed for as many lifestyle salons as possible, which is a concept. We call them concept salons. And we had quite a few. But we still, you know, we considered ourselves a luxury brand within that environment that, you know, was in Harvey Nichols, was, you know, more than £1 million account in Harvey Nichols, you know, that launched in the salons in Harvey Nichols. And again, this was the first kind of real brand taking over a salon. So we took, you know, we launched when Harvey Nichols of Leeds opened, and then we launched in the Urban Retreat. You know, and we wore, I think that we were first to market in a lot of things that have, you know, are the backbone of the salons today. You know, it's inspired people to think differently and to see the value of retail and what services looks like. And I think it was a really interesting journey for me, because it was all about, more so than ever, it was about being in people's businesses, you know, understanding what's going on, listening to them, supporting them. I mean, eventually, obviously, I had, you know, I went from being the national sales manager for Salon division, where we had hair and beauty, and some salons had hair and beauty, and some salons were just beauty, to, you know, looking after the QVC team, to looking after the retail team, to running the whole company. Obviously, my workload changed significantly, and then launching hair color. But what we had is we had some real masters of hairdressing that inspired the hairdressers. And what my team had to do was to help the salons build a business. So I kind of got, you know, again, learning on the way. You know, from my background, I haven't said yes to every job and thought I'll have to learn on the way, but I certainly had to learn about mindset and people and the approach to business. And I think that's when I realized that, you know, retail consultants are, you know, a person's support. You know, a hairdresser is a human therapist, first and foremost. You know, they have to have a lot of tenacity and drive and resilience to succeed.
Let me jump in there and ask you about that, because all of a sudden you're dealing with salon owners of small businesses. Was there, what were the big differences that you sort of noticed with dealing with these owners of small salons? I mean, a lot of the people listening to this won't understand what Urban Retreat is, so I'll get you to explain that. But you were looking after both Urban Retreat, looking after Aveda, but also dealing with individual little salons dotted around the country that were carrying the product. What were some of the ahas? I know these are generalizations to make about the hairdressing industry from a business perspective that you would pick up on.
Yeah, I think the ahas were that a lot of them were very insular, that they didn't look outside of their business for opportunity. They weren't great networkers, so they needed that support of engagement. They often didn't have enough money in their month to do what they needed to do. But they also were the pillar of most communities that they were involved in, you know, and it was, how can you help them be the best version of themselves, not just as an individual from a business perspective, but also, you know, from a community perspective. And it was really interesting to see that, you know, a hairdresser is a show person most of the time, but equally has their own fears and anxieties and struggles. And I think that what we did as a brand is we made people feel like they belonged with us. We were all aligned. We were together. We would bring them to social events. We would do as much as we possibly could to talk about the brand as a community. Horst Rackelbacker used to call my team the Johovah Witnesses. It was about self-care before self-care had even started.
Yeah.
Bring emotional support as well as business support as well as product support.
Yeah. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've worked with lots of different brands, including Aveda. And I've sat down with Horst and had a meal with him and had some one-to-one time with him, an incredible individual. And in my sort of reinvention of myself, where I've become more of a business coach over the last 20 years, I get to see the inside of a lot of people's salons on a spreadsheet. And there's one of the things that has often stood out to me, and you've already alluded to it, and that is the retail component of a Aveda salon in terms of their business is, I'm going to suggest to you, pretty much every time I have a coaching client that's Aveda, it's pretty much every time that a higher percentage of their revenue is coming from retail. And I often look at that and I think to myself, so what is the secret sauce with Aveda? Now, my take on it is that Aveda, Horst, right from the beginning, even before the Estee Lauder days, before Estee Lauder, bought Horst out, is that Horst understood the power of creating a buying environment and not just a selling environment. Whereas a lot of other product companies, they'll sell hairdressers their products, and then the salon owner and the manufacturer is trying to get hairdressers to sell. Now, I'm not saying that Aveda don't do that, but I am saying that I think they have been the masters forever of creating a buying environment, in that you walk into a salon that happens to stock Aveda, and whether it's the point of sale, the shelf talkers, the smell as soon as you walk in the door, that you're sort of enveloped into this, oh, what can I buy today? Whereas most salons, you do not think that when you walk into them. So give me your take on that as someone who's really worked heavily within the brand.
I think that, and to be honest, Anthony, I think that the UK can take full responsibility for making that happen. And I think that what we did in the UK was we made it a shopping experience. We didn't sell in, twos and threes of products or even ones. We put together a whole order, and supporting that with education to help people to understand the importance of sell-through and connection. We really, again, a Horst creative value-added service, scalp massage, a finishing touch makeup, the hand and arm massage. We really embraced all of those techniques and approach to the consumer. And I think that, we went into department stores and quite easily became, the top 5 selling brand within the stores that we partnered with, in days when, the Estee Lauder brands and the other brands were really, really big, and we went up against them. And I think that what we did in the 90s is we really harnessed Aveda as a lifestyle brand, and I don't think that there were many brands doing that then, and we talked about it in that way. We were hugely successful, and I think that what we taught salons here was that this is easy money if you are supporting and guiding and believing in what these products can do and how they can make your consumer feel. And I think that was very, very rich for salon owners in the UK and Ireland, and because that's obviously the distribution that we had. Because I think that you're right, most brands teach you how to sell. They sell into you. They don't teach you. They sell into you a package, right? And they give you a promotion to sell through, but they don't tell you how to articulate that. They don't tell you that, always give you the features and benefits. They don't motivate your team necessarily to sell through, and we always came with a sell in to sell through strategy. So strategically thinking, we were always, it's not about selling it in, it's about giving the customer the things that they need, the products that they need, the service that they need, and actually selling through.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We could talk about that for the rest of this podcast, but in the interest of time, we need to move on. But I've touched on, and you've touched on, Urban Retreat. Can you just give us a little insight into what Urban Retreat is? Because a lot of people have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, so Urban Retreat started out as being an Aveda concept salon. So we believed that if we was going to sell to salons, we would have to have 1 or 2 salons that showed you how we did it. We would lead by example. When we sold to Estee Lauder, they did not want to keep the salons, with the exception to the flagship at Holborn. So they obviously took that business. It made complete sense. It's where the education centre was. It was beautifully designed. You know, that it was a fantastic building. So it really epitomised the Aveda of the future as well as the Aveda of the past. It was spectacular, and I'm sure you would have seen it as well. And
yes, yeah.
It's like amazing, in the heart of London. It was the first big, hairdressing brand to say, look at this space and look what we can do. It was exceptional, exemplary. And so we kept the salon. So when the salons left Harvey Nichols and moved to Harrods, it was no longer a flagship Aveda salon. It was Urban Retreat in its own right. So we had more than 300 brands. We launched the first Creme de la Mer beauty rooms. We had, Sisley, we had GHD, we had Moroccan Oil, we had Aveda, we had L'Oreal, we had Kerastars. We were the best, we were the highest retailer and purchaser of Kerastars as one account in Europe. So this was 20,000 square feet. This was a multi-million pound business, way past the 15 million mark.
Yeah.
And it went from 5 to 15. And it had 225 members of staff. It had 45 styling stations, 27 beauty rooms, manicure, pedicure, a small medi-spa, a cafe. Eventually, we opened a body clinic. We were into self-care and wellness back in 2012, when, even 2010, when people weren't even thinking about, shape changing through fitness, diet, nutrition. We had a beauty area, which is about holistic health. So, it was a big operation, and it was on the top floor of Harrods.
Yeah. And were you directly involved in running that on a day-to-day basis, or were you once removed? Yeah,
no. So I went after I left Aveda, because I didn't want to go back to Estee Lauder. I'd started my career there. So I decided to kind of step away, and I joined Paul Taylor at Modern Organic Products, and we built that brand up significantly. And then it was sold to L'Oreal in a short 2.5 year window. And then I went back to Urban Retreat in 2006. And he exponentially grew that business from that day on. And at that time, we had an Urban Retreat in Manchester and an Urban Retreat in London. And I helped George. So I was, a shareholder and part of the Vicky Euler wigs. I had a whole kind of other, side of the business.
Okay.
Going. And ran Urban Retreat.
So did you just say that Modern Organic Products was sold? You just said it was sold to L'Oreal. You didn't mean to say that, did you?
I never meant to say that. Revlon, sorry.
Revlon, yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad I corrected you there. Okay. Wow. See, there's so many things we can dip in and out of here. And for the people who started listening to, and I'm sure that everybody has, listened to the first episode, the person that's talking now with the business acumen and the responsibilities, etc., is just a totally different person to the person that we listened to in episode 1. So what I want to ask you about is, was there a point in your professional career where you stopped feeling like you're faking it until you make it, and you actually realized that you're good at building and running a business? Was there a moment where that sort of happened, or did it just sort of this gradual evolvement happen?
No, it wasn't gradual at all, Anthony. I spent a lot of years in fear. I was terrified that people would discover that, I didn't learn to read and write until I was 15. I was terrified that people would say, oh, I know your family, your brother's an addict and a kind of thief, and your mum does, dodgy deals. I kept thinking all of that was going to come out and haunt me. And I think that I had imposter syndrome for sure. It's like, why do I don't deserve to be here. I don't necessarily deserve to be recognized. I was winning awards. I was on the board of Cosmetic Executive Women. And I just thought, you know what, I just need to unload the fact that, I was a delinquent, that I didn't go to school, that I didn't learn to read and write, and until, someone took the time to tell me that I could be so much more if I did. And so I thought, how do I overcome that? And I just thought the only way to get rid of this, the only way to release shame, is to actually talk about it. Talk about the things that have happened to you in the past. You let it out, and it's a bit like manifesting. It's a bit like manifesting, in my belief. If you are full of shame and fear, you need to tell somebody, right? You need to, and if you can, you need to tell more than one person, because it lightens the load. By nature, I believe that human connection is the most powerful, enriching way to live. Right. So vulnerability, speaking from the heart, in my opinion, telling people where you're at rather than them trying to guess what you're saying or to read your body language or to pull out of you what's not quite right. I feel like, wouldn't the world be a beautiful place if we could just say what we think and feel most of the time? And so I decided to join some charities. So I joined Action for Children first, and then I was invited to the board of the women's leadership group for the Prince's Trust. And, we raised a lot of money, a lot of awareness. And then at Cosmetic Executive Women, I went to Caroline Neville, who was previously one of my amazing mentors and is still a very dear friend today. And I told her about my life. And I said, I want to do a mentoring event at CW, and I want to talk about it. And if anything comes out of that any other way, I want to let people know that you don't have to, have all the answers or all of the ability initially, but you do have to believe in yourself, and you do have to ask for help. So I started the journey.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I was going to ask you this anyway, and this seems like the perfect time to ask it, and this is a funny way of putting it, but was part of your upbringing and the challenges that you had as a kid growing up, was that helpful in a way when you got more into business? Because you didn't have a formal education. You were inventive, you were creative, you were street smart, and you knew that you had to get scrappy and think outside the box, because that was what survival was all about. So as opposed to having a degree, going to university, studying all this stuff, you had this different sort of education in life. So that's what I'm asking you about. Was it helpful that you could get scrappy, so to speak, and think outside the box of different ways to solve problems?
I think so. I think if I had gone to school, my life would have been very, very different. I don't think that I would have become this hotshot lawyer, which my daughter will probably become. I don't think that I would have gone on to university and become, a successful businesswoman. I think that actually not knowing and learning on the way has been the key to my success, because I feel that, when everybody's thinking like that, I'm thinking like that. That's just a difference. And that's why I can help strategically build brands, because sometimes the obvious isn't obvious, and I think because I always think, laterally, I can find solutions. And I think that, and I'm not saying that people, other people have more integrity than me, but I feel like I am a bit more of an open book. So, I can have those conversations, and actually I don't follow a pattern. So I would never, again, I've never taken a role for money, Anthony. I've never kind of said, oh, that's a brilliant job, that's going to pay me, 200,000 a year and $500,000 this and X amount of shares. It's like, will I enjoy doing it? Can I add value? Will I be able to make a difference?
So let me jump in there. Every time you go to breathe, I jump in. Because that's the only way I'm going to get a question in here, right? I mean that in the nicest possible way. So what is your message to, because, there's a hairdresser listening to this, a young woman in her 20s. I don't know who she is. It's just a caricature of what I'm saying. And she's thinking to herself at some level, or he, are thinking to himself, well, it's all very well for you, but I have come from this upbringing, that upbringing, didn't get a good education, you know, a list a mile long that probably couldn't match your list of reasons why you can't succeed. So I'm trying to extract, what's the lesson that you would say to that young person about, listen, don't give up. Anything's possible. You know, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but what would you say to them based on your life experience?
Go to the next largest town and go to the salon that you want to be like, and see what they do, and have discussions and build opportunity and look and observe. The subconscious mind holds on to more than you ever thought possible. And so, you know, it's not about manifesting it. It's about understand what it takes to build something. Be observant. You know, I don't care if you have to sit outside in your car every morning and watch the staff going in, look at their mood, look at how they behave. Whatever it is that you have to do that you feel you need to learn, you can learn in people watching. You can learn in engaging. You can learn if there is a favorite restaurant that you go to and you love everything that they do. What can you learn from that? What can you learn from the fact that the hostess knows your name, that they greet you, that they take you to your favorite table? You know, there is so much that we can learn around us to fuel who we want to be and what we want to do. Not everything old is new again. Everything is constantly being reinvented and improved. So, and from a salon perspective, how are you going to make people feel? Because how you make people feel will be the reason why they come back. So, you know, don't think that, you know, you don't have enough money to, you know, have the brand that you want today. How are you going to make how are you going to make your clients feel?
Okay. I think that I don't know, your life, this podcast, the series of podcasts, the two of them, they're sort of broken into three parts, and we're about to start talking about the third part. I think the first part was your upbringing, your early life. The second part was very much about your professional career with all these different brands that you've been working with. And now the third part is about the direction that your life's gone and now. So I suppose the best way to introduce that is to say that, you know, life throws all of us some unexpected challenges. And once you've got sort of business and money under control, what sort of followed on from that? Because you obviously, you were very much into fashion and beauty and health. And there was this sort of segue into self-care and health and mental health and your personal health, etc. So talk to us about that.
Well, I suppose after leaving Urban Retreat, I went to Marks and Spencer's Beauty. I'd always wanted to work for Marks and Spencer's, by the way. I just figured it would be on the till, you know, swiping the advert. I never thought that I would be developing their product, which was an absolute joy. And the team were amazing. And I thoroughly enjoyed those changes. And from the Marks and Spencer's Beauty concept, I was picking up other projects, helping brands to develop, you know, where they were going, what they were doing, strategically thinking. People were paying me money to come in and mentor them and look at the creation of their brand. And then I thought, I want to understand how the private equity sector works. What makes them choose to buy a brand or invest? And so I reached out to a few, and I signed up with Unilever Investments and did a few little things with them. I worked with Blue Gem Investments, where I, you know, did a sale process. They acquired QMS. I worked with B&B Investments, which was an investment fund that was funded by Walgreen Boots Alliance. And that's how I went on to be the CEO of Aromatherapy Associates. So I kind of took this portfolio career. And then since then, I've gone on and I've worked with brands that I've either done equity, or made some investment into, and that's where I'm at today. And I've got quite a few of those, and that's what pays me an income, which obviously also has a kickback once the brands sell. And I've lost a couple along the way, where I've lost money and time and effort, and that's been, you know, interesting equally. I suppose the self-care bit came from being at the Urban Retreat, running a successful business and not feeling myself, and then watching my mum at 65, you know, die of cancer, and spending that time with her, while she died, basically, you know, from the 5th of June to the 9th of August. And it was the hardest time of my life. And, you know, still today, I get very emotional about it. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, equally, I looked at my mum and I thought, shit, you know, she's 65, you know, I'm in my 40s, you know, this could be me. And that's when the alarm signals kind of went on to start, you know, losing weight, getting healthy. I mean, if you look at pictures of me today at 58 and you look at pictures of me at 48, you'd think they were the wrong way around. So again, taking control of my health was on the basis, well, I was inspired by my mum to do that. Otherwise my life would have been the same. So my mum was, as much as we were like friends, she was definitely an inspiration to me in many different ways. So I took control of my health. I brought in a dear friend that helped me nutritionally get on track. I started going on retreats. I started fasting. And that's when I got curious about the wellness sector. So obviously, you know, being involved with that and then strategic working with different brands along the way has been very, very exciting. But what I do know today is that nothing is more important than your health. And I do not mind dying at any point, right? I just want my health span and my lifespan to run as closely together as possible. I don't mind having a short-term illness and popping off, you know, but I don't want to be sick for a very, very long time. And I fear that a lot of the population globally are heading that way based on the data, you know, through how they choose to sleep, eat, manage stress, you know, exercise or not. So that has been, you know, I'm a big advocate of that. And I'm a big ambassador of, you know, self-care is your healthcare. And so start today if you can. You know, I've lost 30 kilos in weight. I've built muscle. I've beat cancer. You know, I actually have intuitively been able to manage my health better. I've never really been a big drinker. I've never taken drugs. I'm too terrified on the basis of my, you know, my heritage, and it would be too terrified to even step into that. I don't eat ultra processed food. So there's lots of things that I've changed. Last year, I didn't feel well. I felt, is it my liver? Is it my gallbladder? Is there something going on? Because again, I think back to the different things that happened to my mum. And I went for a random scan that I was booked in for. It wasn't me asking for the scan at a health retreat, Palazzo Fuji, which is in Fuji, in just outside Rome. And she said to me, there is something going on in your womb. You need to go and get this checked. So this was this year. And I said, it's funny because I haven't felt great, but I don't know what it is. And I was writing an article so at that point, I think I'd done 5 retreats, like every quarter a different retreat. So blood tests, you know, no inflammation in my body. My metabolic syndrome was good. You know, all of the different things that would be alarming if they'd have been incorrect, but they were all okay. They were all within reason on the basis of my weight, my height, my age, etc. So my doctor rang me and said, you know, there are some abnormalities here. You know, I think that we should recheck it. And I said, well, just to let you know, I've had 3 generations of women before me die of cancer, and all of them have had gynecological issues at some point or another in relation to cancer. My mum had a hysterectomy at 37. So she said, no problem, we'll get you on a fast track. And within, 7 weeks, I was diagnosed with cancer of the womb and the cervix, and the possibility of it being in my lymph nodes and in my bowel based on the MRI and the CT scans. So I got my life in order as best I can, rewrote my wills, did all the usual things. And on the 21st of October, I had a radical hysterectomy. I was 6 hours on the operating table and, in fear of what was next. Thankfully, I didn't need chemo or radiotherapy afterwards. And now I am, clear of cancer, but obviously monitored for the next 5 years. Again, other people may choose to do this differently. I chose to train for my surgery. I chose to build muscle and get fit, to get mentally fit, to be, to put, all of my woes to rest and just focus on, I took time out from doing it. I limited my workload. I probably lost a bit of income in doing so, but I was fighting for my life, Anthony. And that's, and I just thought, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to be the best looking portrait. And I'm also going to give myself a fighting chance by being resilient. I didn't even think about an open coffin or anything, but when I think about it, I probably did subconsciously thinking, I'm going to make sure my hair's blow dried. I did say to my lash expert, because I have these tiny blonde lashes, that if I die, you have to come and put lashes on me. So, that I brought humor into it. I did a hike with one of my dearest friends just before I went into surgery. I went out dancing with my friends. I trained 3 times a week. I, did all my usual meditating, my intermittent fasting. I did all of the things that I needed to do in the same way that I would run a brand, in the same that I would.
So there was a very real chance that you wouldn't have survived that operation.
Well, I think that it was the fear of, I was on the operating table for 6 hours. My heart had dropped to 37. And I think, did I create that through the terrified going in? I knew that I didn't always react well to anesthetic as a child. So it wasn't that I wouldn't survive the operation. It was, what was the outcome going to be once they removed those lymph nodes, once they took the lumps from my bowel, once they performed the radical hysterectomy, part of your vagina, your cervix, and everything inside. So, your feminine reproductive system. So in my mind, I'm now a wombless virgin, and, I'm ready to be. But I felt like I had to train for it, because that is how I've always lived my life. I believe that success comes in any situation as if you choose to be the athlete in your own life. What does it take to get you where you want to be? And I wanted to survive, so I had to give myself the best chance possible. And so all I would say to anybody that says, what do I want to do, is, write it down, learn, discover, and know that you have the capability to be the athlete in your own life, to lead. But it requires training in whatever you choose to do. So when you're a salon owner or a business person or a window cleaner, you've got to do what it takes to be the best, because if you do any less than that, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, so you go all in with everything. I think that's apparent with everything we've spoken about. You are all in. You don't do things by halves. If you're gonna do anything, whether it's work, whether it's shoplifting, whether it's whatever it is, you go the full 9 yards. So good on you too. Okay, you just mentioned, you ran off a little bit of a checklist there about, you said, I did my intermittent fasting, I did my meditating, you did all these things. How much in this, this phase of your life has spirituality sort of kicked in? I know you are off to India shortly, you told me the other day, so, meditating and fasting and all these sort of things. How much help have you sort of found those things to be, not just for your physical and mental health, but just, for your physical and mental health and for you as a being?
I think to be the best version of yourself, you have to connect with your darkest corners, whatever they are. You have to understand what is bringing you fear. You have to understand what is creating anxiety. I think from a very young age, I never used to speak to a God, but I always I believed that I had these guides. I had some kind of, beautiful Irish soul tell me at a very young age, is that, if you're ever in need of help, just reach out to your guides. They're there, they're listening to you. So I think I've always kind of, spoke out loud about that. And I think that working with Donna Karan and Aveda definitely got me into spirituality. Horst, as you know, is a very spiritual man. Donna Karan, most definitely. And again, I latched onto the things that they did and believed and talked about and made them some of my, mantras. I've cold water showered for more than 30 years. I only wash my face in the morning with cold water. I meditate every morning. I try to stretch every morning. I body brush and face brush. I brush my face with a tiny little hand brush, a little wooden hand brush or a toothbrush for 30 years every single day, like a man would shave. I brush my face. I mean, I know a man doesn't shave up here, but I do everywhere. And so, I've done all of these little rituals, which I consider self-care. Remember, when you have lack of food in your life, I appreciate every mouthful of food I eat. And if it's not good for me, I mean, I've eaten cheeseburgers and I've eaten, buttermilk chicken, and I've done all of those. Now I kind of my tastes have changed. But, you know, I've always kind of made that process of trying to, and my second husband was a cordon bleu chef, so he taught me how to cook. So the cooking has got better since, you know, since my late 30s. But previous to that, I would still always cook for my son, even though he'd say it wasn't always that good. But, you know, I believed in food. Because I'd had lack of food. So, you know, that was a big part of my life. So, yeah, I think that all of these elements always existed. It's just that probably now, as I'm aging, I'm leaning into them more. I went to Booking It Will Help Me because I've read an article a very long time ago on the benefits of fasting and combating type 2 diabetes. And I was telling one of my girlfriends, and she said, "You need to go to Booking It Will Help Me. I'm going to send you." And then,
so sorry, what is that?
Booking It Will Help Me is the oldest fasting clinic in probably, you know, in the world. It's 120 years old, and they in fasting. And I took myself off there, and I told people this is what I was going to do. And I had a girlfriend say, "Oh, you know, I work with those guys. I can send you a reduced rate." And then somebody else said, "Oh, you can write an article for me whilst you're there." And so, you know, all of these things happen because you're out there talking about what you want to do next. You know, if you want to change your life, the best thing you can do is tell 10 people that you trust. Yeah, if you're your job, talk about it, you know, not necessarily with your boss, you know, talk about it with other people, because, you know, that is the art of manifestation. You're saying it out loud. And if you don't have the confidence to talk about it initially, then talk to your guides, it might seem like you're talking to nobody, right?
Yeah.
Me, I feel like I'm talking to somebody, but, you know, say it out loud. You know, I learned that, you know, from my cosmic shopping list that I kept as soon as I learned how to read and write, I realized that was a manifestation list. But what I realized is when you write things down, it's one thing. When you think it's one, when you write it down, it's another. And when you say it out loud, you've got more chance of it happening.
Yes.
Nature, people to help other people. You're with
that's good.
People will help you. And that's the other thing about owning, you know, a small business. You have to kind of talk about things that you want to change and things that you want to do to get improvement. Never be ashamed of saying, you know, this is where I want to go. I want to be the best, you know, the best at this, the best in this town, the best in this city, the best in this country. And, you know, put some goals in and landmark and celebrate those successes. You know, it's so important that we do that. You know, we don't know how long we're here for. We don't know, you know, what is going to happen to us next. But if we can practice being the best version we possibly can of ourselves every single day, creating opportunities for ourselves and others, that's a life well lived.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, before we wrap up, there's two things I want to ask you, so I've got to be quick with both of them. The first one is, I read somewhere you'd done a fast for 23 days. Is that at the place you just mentioned before? Right, so it's under a controlled environment.
Controlled medical environment. And saying your blood pressure's a bit low, do you think you should eat? And I was like, no, I'll keep going for another day. I'll keep going for another day. I truly believe, because when I had my biopsies, the cancer was not evident in my lymph nodes or in my bowel. But I truly believe that fast wiped out, because, you know, cancer needs sugar, right? It needs bad food to survive, and it needs lots of stress. You take that away, and science says that, and there's lots of white papers writing about it. I believe those 23 days saved my life.
Wow. Okay. That's fantastic. I'll put the link for that place, or the name of that place, in the show notes, because I know people will be going, well, that's very interesting. Let me find out more about that.
They do boxes that you buy into and fast that they ship out to you. It's a brilliant resort. And then the other place that discovered the cancer was Palazzo Fuji in Italy. And again, you know, holidays now are changing, right? People are going on retreats to discover more about their health and wellness. It's like a health check. It's like putting your car in for an MOT and knowing where you stand. Because, you know, we have to work outside of the realms of the pharmaceutical sector as well. Because pills don't fix things.
Yeah, very important to acknowledge that. Okay, I know you've touched on this already, that you do a lot of work now with like the Prince's Trust and women's leadership groups and that sort of stuff. And I also read somewhere that you do some outreach sessions with children that have had a sort of a similar, you know, life experience or journey to you. I mean, I think that's that giving back part of your life as an incredibly valuable thing to do. Can you just talk to us about that before we wrap up?
Well, I'm not with the Prince's Trust anymore, and I kind of held back. I've held back on charity. I am with two charities still today. One is 18 Keys, which is homeless women. So it's raising funds to build a property and to refurbish a property and prove a concept, because there are more homeless women living on the streets today than ever before. So if anybody wants to help that charity, that is brilliant. That's 18 Keys. And this is happening in every city in the world. You know, there are more and more women living on the streets. And if you live on the streets, you're dead by the time you're 42. So as a woman, and it's a scary, scary time. So that's my focus now, and I'm fundraising for them, and I sit on their advisory board. The other charity that I'm an ambassador for now is Their World, which is a charity that denies no child an education, and that's Sarah Brown's charity, and that's a global charity that takes no funding from governments anywhere in the world, so that it cannot and will not deny a child an education. It goes into war-torn areas and builds schools, supports children, and sponsors children throughout their life. So constantly, dependent on corporations and sponsors and supporters of the charity. So fundraising is essential to do that, because there's no external funds coming from any government. And the reason why Sarah did that is because she wants to be able to go wherever they are needed.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'll make sure we put all those links in the show notes for today's podcast. Can I ask you just one thing? If you had to just suggest one resource for people that's had an impact on your life, it might be a book, a movie, a place, I don't know, whatever. Where would you send people if you said, listen, just read this, it changed my life, or, do this, it changed my life? What would it be?
I'd say kind of read Who Moved My Cheese, which is like a very simple, easy book.
Yeah. I've read that.
Always done. You're going to get what you've always got.
Yeah.
And actually, that is the book summed up in
one sentence. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's a brilliant book, and I think it's good to share with younger people. If you want to succeed, get a mentor, get someone that is going to help you think differently. Share with them, your biggest fears, your greatest aspirations, and find your tribe, find your community. It's never been more important than it is today. And it terrifies me when I see, I think the biggest risk that we face is dopamine depletion, because we are so ingrained in social media and what that brings to us, how people perceive us, how we're liked, and I think that people are spending way too much time on their phones and not enough time learning and experiencing. We know that, lack of dopamine and hormones is connected to so many cognitive functions in the brain. And I feel like we're dumbing the human beings down right now. And what we need to do is to get creative. We need to dance. We need to find our purpose. We need to create our calm. We need to celebrate and source our peace, which you'll probably find in nature. And we love ourselves. We need to look in the mirror and like what we see. And we all have an opportunity to enrich our own lives whilst enriching somebody else's.
Well, that is a perfect place to wrap up. I mean, I know we could keep talking for ages. You've got so much wisdom, and you're so generous in sharing your wisdom so sort of openly and honestly. So let me just finish up by saying, if you're listening to this podcast with Tracey and have enjoyed it as much as I did, then do me a favor and share it with people that you know would also enjoy it, and pass it along. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. So to wrap up, Tracey Woodward, thank you so much for being on this week's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast and sharing all your life experience so openly and honestly. It's very much appreciated.
Well, it's a joy to have been with you. Thank you, Anthony, for the opportunity. Really, I'm very grateful.
Cheers. Pleasure. Thank you.